Hey, everybody, my name is Jamie. I can't play guitar, and welcome to the Daily Hangout, July 5th. 2023 is today's date. We're eating food, we're watching videos, we're hanging out here. I just did a bunch of work. I got a haircut. Whew. My wife is coming home in about a half hour, so that clock's running. We apologize if we have to cut out a little early, but I don't think that's ever been an unestablished narrative on this stream, that we kind of do what we want. So welcome. If you're new to the stream, this is our daily excuse to hang out for at least a half hour and watch some videos with all of you, and make sure that I get a half hour of guitar in sort of every day. I've been pretty busy recently. I did play guitar for about 15 minutes this morning, not on stream, and then I'm going to try and stream before I go to bed, but I've had a busy day with both my son and trying to get in some of my day job as well. A lot of work there, which is good. Good. If you want to check out what I do for my day job, I am essentially the creative director at both Buffalo Bottlecraft and Lost Goods. You can look up Love in the Dumpster on YouTube. That is our YouTube channel, or Buffalo Bottlecraft on YouTube. That's our other channel. And then we've also got Love in the Dumpster on TikTok. That is my boss, Dave. He is a great creator. He does dumpster diving, DIY, repurposing, recycling, upcycling content. He's had a Vice documentary made about him, and he's just a really cool guy who I'm glad to have been working with the last few years, or the last year and a bit. It's been exciting working with him, and I think we were peaking like crazy. But either way, we're going to shout out here, shoot out of a cannon, and start to watch some videos that we had been putting on the back burner. And right now we've got First Thought, July 5th, which is today's date, 2023. We're going to restart it. This is the daily news that we're going to digest, and then we've got just a few other things to go over. And I don't know what other videos we're going to watch yet, but let's start off with this one. So I
between 1999 and 2019.
Apologize, I'm going to eat some food while we watch this.
In today's biased news, more shootings in the U.S., chaos in Sudan, and a global debt crisis looms on the horizon. In tragic but unsurprising news, the U.S. has seen a new wave of shootings in Philadelphia, Baltimore, and Texas, in which 10 people have lost their lives. The three events took place on Monday and Tuesday. The victims included children as young as toddlers. This is yet another episode in America's continuous failure at dealing with deep societal problems that allow or push people to carry out such atrocities. The conversation has centered around calls for gun control, with President Biden calling for a tightening of firearm laws as Republicans continue to block any attempts at doing so. In the usual macabre commentary, police commissioners said, "We have absolutely no idea why this happened. The killing spree seems to bear the characteristics of a lot of random mass shootings that happen in the United States." The U.S. has seen over 340 mass shootings so far in 2023, more than one mass shooting every single day. As a result, the U.S. has the most per capita gun deaths of any large high-income country. Several other countries globally have high gun ownership rates, yet far fewer mass acts of violence than the United States. This reflects a societal defect of American life, rooted in lack of access to mental health care, an absence of common-sense gun ownership legislation, and the general precarity of Americans, both in terms of cost of living and quality of life. In addition, mass shootings account for less than 1% of gun violence in the U.S., signaling a deep crisis with no real political solution proposed by the major bipartisan hegemon. Intense battles have broken out in Sudan as the army clashes with paramilitary RSF to cut off their supply routes. The conflict, triggered by disputes over a transition to civilian rule, has led to daily fighting in Khartoum, ethnically motivated killings in Darfur, and the threat of prolonged civil war. Thus far, ceasefire attempts have failed. According to the latest United Nations statistics, the conflict has resulted in significant displacement, with nearly 2.8 million people forced to leave their homes, including approximately 650,000 refugees seeking safety in neighboring countries.
Fucking sad.
The UN Human Rights Council will hold an urgent meeting, requested by Pakistan, to discuss the burning of a Quran outside a mosque in Sweden. The meeting, focused on the rise of religious hatred, is expected to take place later this week. The incident occurred during a protest authorized by Stockholm police, and has drawn condemnation from multiple countries, with Morocco recalling its ambassador to Sweden indefinitely. International reactions include protests in Baghdad and criticism from Turkish President Erdogan, who has promised to block Sweden's accession to NATO. A new study reveals that the number of women dying within a year after pregnancy more than doubled in the US between 1999 and 2019. The research, which excluded COVID-19 pandemic data, shows that the maternal mortality rate per 100,000 live births rose from 12.7 to 32.2 in this 20-year period. The highest number of deaths was recorded among Black women, followed by American Indian and Alaska Native women. Structural racism and lack of access to healthcare are significant factors contributing to this alarming trend. The US has the highest maternal mortality rate among wealthy nations,
That's
yet
disgusting.
again making the US number one in the worst
Fucking
possible
gross.
way.
Yeah. That's correct.
In debt news, the Paris summit, hosted by Macron on June 24th, aimed to address the debt crisis affecting the developing world. Zambia, the first African country to default on its sovereign debt in 2020 due to the COVID-19 pandemic, received approval for the restructuring of $6.3 billion of its loans from its major lenders, including China and Western nations. The debt crisis has become a global concern as many low-income developing countries are in debt distress. Even major economies like the US are expected to have high public debt levels. While there is no evidence of a contagion causing a global crisis yet, economists stress the need for richer countries to act quickly and involve newer creditors, like China and the private sector, in debt restructuring deals to facilitate a faster economic recovery and avoid a repeat of past debt crises. The debt situation was compounded by the 2022 Russia-Ukraine conflict, leading to an increase in global commodity and food prices. As a result, about 60% of low-income developing countries are facing debt restructuring. The 1980s debt crisis serves as a cautionary example, in which many less developed countries agreed to spending cuts in exchange for debt restructuring, leading to a lost decade of lower income levels.
Queued up.
And to
that
end on a
sucks.
positive note, a Japanese research team is making progress on a groundbreaking medication that may enable people to grow new teeth. Clinical trials for this promising drug are set to begin in July 2024,
That'd be
with
dope.
the aim of making it available for general use by 2030. The drug targets individuals who lack a full set of adult teeth due to congenital factors, specifically a condition called anodontia, affecting around 1% of the population. Don't
Pretty
think this
interesting.
means you can stop brushing your teeth, though. We're watching you.
No, you shouldn't.
That's
but
all for today.
It's cool.
We'll be back day
There can
after
be
tomorrow
multiple
with more
reasons
news.
people,
As always, you can
lack
support the show and get the news in text form a few
mental
hours
health,
early
so-
by becoming a patron at patreon.com/firstthought.
All right, so we have a few different videos queued up here. Let's see. And if we're lucky, it's a Ubisoft why they're hated. All right, so we're gonna go over a few. Videos here. We've got our playlist for the day. Let's cue it up. Library playlist. Daily Hangout. All right. The sad truth about Twitter's rate limit. Steve Burns lied to you, but it's okay. He escaped Luke's clues. How Watergate ruined everything, and Ubisoft why they're hated. That is the 4 videos we're watching. First one's by Fireship. Second one's by Patrick CC. Next one's by Leah Miller. And last one is by Company Man. Subscribe to all these channels. Like all the videos if you're watching with us. And give them a few views in the background if you watched it with us so they can, do good, I guess. Let's watch... We're going to skip to the end of this one, and boom.
It is July 3rd, 2023, and you're watching The Code Report. In his latest 7D chess move, Elon surprised Twitter users with some exciting new features. First, he decreed a rate limit for everyone on the platform. Non-blue checks get to look at 600 tweets per day, while paying members get to look it up to 6,000 tweets. That may sound harsh, but this is just some tough love from the Twitter king to help us beat off our social media addictions. If you're having withdrawals, though, you can always count on a programmer with an anime profile image to save the day, like this person who developed a Chrome plugin that uses the old Twitter theme and bypasses the rate limit. The second new feature is that Twitter shut off all public access to the website, so currently you must be signed in to look at tweets. In other words, Twitter is almost a full-blown paywall site now. Officially, these new features were deployed on a Friday in a panic because too many bots and web scrapers were accessing tweets with automated tools. Web scraping is an absolutely despicable practice, and if you want to learn how to do it at an industrial scale, check out this video on my second channel. To add insult to injury, Twitter went down for a while yesterday, and it appears some bad JavaScript code made it into production that would call the API in an infinite loop from the client side, resulting in a self-inflicted DDoS attack. The thing is, though, real men test in production. I was able to obtain exclusive access to this garbage code. No,
that's not a legal meme. That meme is illegal. Can we go back to Can we go back to this meme?
Months ago, Twitter
no, it's too good.
And what we have is a
Bert Kreischer. It's got me Bert Kreischering
in a self-inflicted DDoS attack. The thing is, though, real men test.
No, this is just such a fucking ruthless real men test in production. I'm gonna have to get that and just fucking tweet that myself. I don't even tweet.
I was able to obtain exclusive access
real
to
men test in production.
And what we have is a recursive async function that will catch and fetch forever. But Twitter inflicted DDoS attack. The thing is, though, real men test in production. I was able to obtain exclusive access to this garbage code. And what we have is a recursive async function that will catch and fetch forever. But Twitter's been around for nearly 20 years at this point, so why is web scraping all of a sudden a big problem? Well, a couple months ago, Twitter shut down access to its free API and made it way too expensive for any of us peasant-level developers to access. This move also inspired the Reddit CEO to strap on a set of balls and take his API pricing to the moon to kill off third-party apps. Despite a massive failed protest, the pricing went into effect yesterday, and third-party apps like Apollo are officially dead. Let's take a moment of silence for those we lost. About this whole Twitter fiasco is that I find it somewhat hard to believe that web scraping is the primary reason they would implement such drastic changes, especially because this would reduce advertising impressions, which is still by far its biggest source of revenue. If we do a little more research, we'll find that Twitter had been refusing to pay its Google Cloud bill, at least until recently. Sundar had to hit up Elon via SpaceX, his other company that launches rockets into fake space, which also does business with GCP. It's not the only bill that Twitter hasn't paid, and was recently evicted from its Boulder, Colorado offices over unpaid rent. The Google Cloud contract is a way bigger deal, though, at $100.
That's that Trump tactic. Just don't pay your $1 trillion bills. Like, I think we've all been a little late on a cable bill or something, but like just not paying your fucking $300 million. Not at all. Like not even pretending like you're going to. Really cool. I'm glad that's considered completely okay. But if you don't pay like $100 credit card bill, it's like stays with you for fucking like 10 plus years and tanks your credit forever. That makes sense.
Of millions of dollars per year, and coincidentally expired on June 30th. It's pure speculation whether these new features are related to the Google Cloud contract, but like I've said many
so this is your daily reminder that what does Philip DeFranco say? Everything made up is nothing is real. I don't know that that's true, but for finance, daily reminder that rich people live in fantasy land and that money is stupid, and just if you start to get stressed out about it, it's okay because it's really stressful, but then what I do is I panic usually. Actually, it's I don't have any good advice for money trouble. It is fake though, so once in a while I can remind myself that money's fake, and for like maybe like an hour I'm a little less stressed out about it.
Times before, once you get locked into a cloud platform, they have you by the balls. If you stop paying the bill, you first get bumped down to a rate limited tier, and then eventually the lights go out. That could explain why Twitter implemented a rate limit, because they're likely right in the middle of migrating their infrastructure to a Raspberry Pi, which are still pretty hard to come by. Another theory going around is that Elon is actually fighting a battle against agencies like the CIA and NSA, who are the ones behind all the scraping and trying to use Twitter to create a Death Star of censorship.
The
real scraper. I don't know if that's just Elon fanboy fiction, but I'm still putting my money on him in his upcoming death match against Zuck in the Roman Coliseum.
No.
He's got the body of a mid-century refrigerator, and I just don't see any way 5'8" Zuck will be able to overcome the size
gonna
differential.
kick him in the
But let me know
balls.
whose corner you're in the comments. No matter the outcome, though, the important thing is that we enjoy our
Zuck
bread and
does
circuses.
jujitsu.
This has
I
been the
want
Code
Zuck
Report.
to
Thanks for
snap his
watching,
neck
and
and
we'll see you in the next
then
one.
somehow someone rushes the ring and
On April 29th,
and gets Zuck too.
2002, Season 4, Episode
Alright,
24
that was a good one.
of Blue's Clues, Steve Burns announced to the world that he was leaving for college and would be replaced by his brother Joe. But that was a lie. The truth is, Steve Burns never wanted to be on children's television in the first place, and he was finally able to escape. But because of this lie, some disturbing rumors were brought to light.
Yeah, everyone
that
said he
most
was like doing drugs, addicted to whippets. I heard when I was like in high school. It's fucking wild.
believed rumor was that Steve had
guess he
died
just,
in
like-
a fatal car crash. A more ridiculous
really?
rumor was that he was
Drug
murdered
addiction.
by the Blues Clues producers or died
Dude,
in an
really?
unsuccessful attempt to fight the Taliban.
I
However,
would've
the most believable
liked to
theory
hear
was that
those.
Steve was depressed, got addicted to H, and
Yeah, that's
rebelled
what I
against
heard.
the kid show to start a rock band. And that theory
Oh,
wasn't entirely
I didn't hear that part.
false. While the public saw a seemingly cheerful demeanor on screen, Steve struggled with his depreciating mental health off screen. I didn't know it yet, but I was the happiest depressed person in North America. I was struggling with severe clinical depression the whole time I was on that show. Steve's job was to be happy, uplifting,
Dude,
full of
his
joy
fucking
and wonder
dancing,
all the
dude.
time. He had to pretend to be interested and amazed at the smallest things, like discovering Blue's paw print that was directly in front of him. He spent 10 hours per day filming
That's-
in an empty blue room so that he
Oh,
could be
yeah.
superimposed on the
I guess
digitally
that's
animated
pretty-
world of Blue and her friends.
I wonder
At the
what
time,
camera they
technology
used for
wasn't
that.
as advanced as today, meaning Steve had nothing visual or tangible to work with. Steve said his experience was awful and compared it to acting at the bottom of a swimming pool. Pools are filled with water, so stay hydrated.
Drink
As if his
water.
experience wouldn't be any more taxing on his mental health, the insane things posted about him online made things even worse. Take this game on Newgrounds, for example, where your objective was to destroy Blue and then assassinate Steve. You eliminate
the
the dog and then
fuck,
go
dude?
into the house where Steve is flipping you off. So you shoot him until his head pops off and then the house burns down. He also
Okay.
had to read creepy fan fiction, like this one that romanticizes the idea of Blue assaulting Steve with a deadly weapon.
Why?
For some reason, people love the idea of stripping the innocence away from a children's TV show and trying to create a disturbing narrative around it. To
I
this
think that's
day,
just like-
TikTokers express theories that Steve is a drug addict living in a crack house and that his hallucinations cause him to talk to inanimate objects, which come to life.
just some
People also
stupid
believe that the
juvenile
children's
shit, dude.
voices we occasionally hear are actually Steve's neglected children, helplessly watching him feed into his addiction, or the reason Steve is excited whenever he gets mad.
I feel like these theories might have been like interesting in like 2002 when the show was newer. When there wasn't like a smorgasbord of shows that actually do what these people are theorizing about, like Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared, or any litany of the Adult Swim shows that lampoon children's shows. So it's just super goofy that like it makes me frustrated because this is like one of the genuinely better shows for engaging children, and it's a show that's been tried to be copied, but Steve himself is just kind of like extremely charismatic, and yeah, that's a shitty reading of the show, but it's obviously just like they're just younger people. It's like an edgy way to say that that the show might be like actually about drugs, which is like something I would do all the way into my early 20s. You know, kind of be like, wouldn't it be sick if like they were smoking pot backstage? And it's like, I mean, I guess. Who cares? It's a kid's show. It was, I think, honestly, it was just straightforward intentions. They weren't trying to hide anything or anything like that. I know that's pretty much what Patrick's going to say, but, like, I've always been fairly passionate about stuff that I watched growing up, and you know, adults work on children's shows with the intent of, like, genuinely enriching their lives when they're watching it. So it's probably frustrating for the people that worked on the show to hear something like that. But you know, it's all also kind of like just in goofy fun, being like, oh, wouldn't it be crazy if I think you can tell he's getting high and talking to everything in his house. It's like, That's a very like mid 2000s kind of take.
Is because it either includes the welfare check he plans to spend on more drugs
Jesus
or contains
Christ.
the drugs themselves. Most of the time, rumors like this are easily dismissed, but for some reason, millions of people all around the world genuinely believe them. It's likely that even you have some random conspiracy theory about Steve embedded
No.
into your brain. However, most people just thought he died. An easy one to disprove, but it still worried him. I'm starting to think that
I just
maybe
thought
there's
he, like,
something people
wasn't on
know
the show
that I
or
don't know.
possibly, like-
In November 1999, the New York Times published an article detailing Steve Burns' time working on Blue's Clues and described the show's impact on children. Most notably, the article addressed the unsettling rumors surrounding Mr. Burns' well-being. The rumors were so prominent that the talk show host Rosie O'Donnell invited Steve to appear on her show. "I died a whole lot of different ways," Steve recalled. "Rosie's kid is a big fan, so I just went on and said, 'Hi, I'm alive. Bye.' It was pretty easy to prove I wasn't dead." These rumors were so powerful that Steve felt the
Steve,
need to
what a
address
goat,
Rosie
dude.
O'Donnell's child with
Fucking
"I'm alive,"
amazing.
because he knew children around the world were genuinely
"Hey,
concerned about him.
what's up?
Because you have to keep in mind that
Okay, bye."
Blue's Clues was the highest rated premiere of any Nickelodeon program and became crucial to the network's growth. It was a pioneer in interactive TV. The original Blue's
Hell
Clues
yeah.
engaged its preschool age audience by breaking the fourth
Dora
wall
is like
and
a shitty
speaking directly
knockoff.
into the camera. Millions of kids around the world felt a deep and personal connection to Steve, which made these rumors more potent. It also made his exit from the show more detrimental.
Joe.
Mr. Burns was 22 when the show premiered, and as he approached his 30s, it was time to move on.
Here's the bold truth about his departure. I knew I wasn't going to be doing children's television all my life, mostly because I refused to lose my hair on a kids' TV show. And it was happening.
Steve knew that his baldness would ruin his boyish look and appeal. The network insisted that he wear a wig, but he refused. Combine this with his depreciating mental health, it was finally time to exit. He told the viewers goodbye in his
Dude,
final
that's so
send-off,
tough.
alongside his new replacement
just got my
Joe,
haircut.
and children around the world.
That's so shitty. I just got my haircut and I was talking to the hairdresser. If you're a fan of like Hassan or there's a number of creators who have espoused the benefits of Propecia. I mean, I think like maybe if it was just more popular when he was on the show, that's tough. You know, those two things could be related. Like he has his dream job and no wonder he's depressed. Like he's losing his hair and like no matter what he does, like he can't think of a way out of it essentially. So he just retires. That's pretty sad actually. And sad to know that like potentially 20 years later could have been no issue, could have taken like Propecia or something. I was definitely just talking to my hairdresser about Propecia and wow.
He was just going to go to college and he would return shortly. They were mistaken. Steve was not off to college. He was about to embark on his journey of being the lead singer of a psychedelic rock band. Steve was interested in music way before Blue's Clues. Steve Burns attended Boyertown Area Senior High School in Berks County, Pennsylvania, graduating in 1992. He played in bands called Sudden Impact, 9 Pound Truck, and the Ivies. He continued playing music on the
Ivies,
side while
Morrissey
pursuing an
ripoff
acting
band.
scholarship at DeSales University in the Lehigh Valley. Shortly after being discovered by
That's
an
near.
agent, Steve dropped out of school and moved to New York City to become a professional actor. In '95, Steve arrived at Nickelodeon under the impression he was auditioning for a voiceover role for a game show, but then later found out it was for a kid show. Steve was a grungy 90s skate rock kid with long hair and earrings, not the ideal fit for the job. Tracy Page Johnson, executive producer and co-creator of Blue's Clues, says that he didn't want to be a children's host. Of the 100 people we auditioned, he was by far the realist. He loved kids, but he didn't want to make a career out of it. Steve didn't want to be on children's television. He wanted to make music, and after he stepped away from the show, he could finally make his dreams a reality.
wonder if he, like,
in
got-
1999,
how well he got
Steve
paid.
walked into a party in New York where he heard the Flaming Lips 1999 album, The Soft Bulletin, for the first time. Considered by many to be the Flaming Lips' masterpiece. This moment changed Burns' life and reignited a passion for music he thought Blue's Clues had burned away. From there, he acquired Pro Tools and started writing songs.
That's
I had
badass.
literally been doing nothing but talking to objects made of
No.
felt for 6 years. There was this weird creative constipation going on. Steve wrote roughly 35
Objects made
songs
of
in
felt.
one sitting, but
I
selected
need
12 to feature on his debut album,
songs
for
for
Dust Mites.
Dust
Now it was time to
Mites.
get in the studio to record,
Steve
so
Burns, I
he
need to
contacted
go
his favorite
save
producer,
this.
Dave Fridman, who had worked with Flaming Lips in the
Hell
past.
yeah.
Interestingly enough,
Wait.
Fridman had just held a Blue's Clues themed birthday party for his children,
David
so he was eager to see what
Fridman.
creative potential
Dude, what the fuck? I had a teacher in high school, and she implied that her like husband was somehow part of the Flaming Lips. Guy is 77 years old. Dude, that's him. Okay, David Friedman. I bet this is the guy, dude. So my teacher said that like he was like somehow related to the Flaming Lips and some other bands. I bet this is her fucking husband, dude. David Friedman. He's from Buffalo, which is where I'm from, so that's we apologize for completely derailing. Wow. Okay. Anyway, cool connection here. He's worked on so much stuff. Tame Impala, OK Go, MGMT, Interpol, Spoon, Slater Kenny, Clap Your Hands, Say Yeah, Tapes and Tapes, Gold Rush, Fan of Planet, Thursday, Mogwai, Elf Power, Neon Indian, Weezer, and Flaming Lips. Just a wild run there, and that's who he's playing with. And this guy is from Buffalo. I'm 90% sure his wife taught me earth science in 8th grade. Anyway, let's keep going.
Steve had. Steve sent Dave some demos, assuming he'd think they sucked, but he got the opposite reaction. Dave liked it, and he asked if Steven Drozd, the drummer of the Flaming Lips, could come and work on some music with them. In a dream world even Blues Clues couldn't have imagined, the Flaming Lips wanted to work with Steve. The bassist, Michael Ivins, later joined the team as well, helping engineer several sessions. The lead vocalist, Wayne Coyne, actually approached Steve with the offer to star in a movie he was directing called Christmas on Mars. He was hesitant at first, but ultimately accepted the role. Because of Steve's ridiculous story of leaving a kid show and starting a band, there was a flurry of interest from various record labels. He ultimately signed with Pius Records in late 2002 when a label executive sat him down and said, "This makes sense. I don't know why, but there's a thread of logic between Blues Clues, The Flaming Lips, and your record." And he was right. Something about the perfectly innocent image of a children's show, combined with the amount of insane rumors surrounding Steve, leading to being a frontman of a psychedelic rock band, was a crazy storyline. Burns professionally entered the world of rock music following the release of his indie rock album Songs for Dust Mites in August of 2003. Although the 12-track album did not garner much commercial success, it received praise from critics, as Pitchfork gave the project a 7.8 out of 10, and complimented Burns's lyrical insight and gift for writing and arranging endlessly listenable pop songs. You can actually hear one of the songs from the album, Mighty Little Man, as the opening theme for the CBS series Young Sheldon.
Dude, that's
Despite
dope.
releasing music and starring in a horror comedy film called Netherbeast, rumors surrounding Steve's death resurfaced on
Wait,
the
is
internet
that-
again.
No.
Burns told MTV in late 2007 that he was starting to
Is it Tim Heidecker?
take it personal.
Come on.
Rock music following the release of his indie rock album, a 7.8 out of 10, and complimented Burns's lyrical insight and gift for writing and arranging endlessly listenable pop songs. You can actually hear one of the songs from the album, Mighty Little Man, as the opening theme for the CBS series Young Sheldon. Despite releasing music and starring in a horror comedy film,
Dude, that has to be. It's like, is it like a Bo Burnham in the back? Like, who is that? Nether Beast Incorporated.
called Netherbeast, rumors surrounding Steve's death resurfaced on the internet again. Burns told MTV in late 2007 that he was starting to take it personally. "I guess the world would prefer that I was dead, but I'm not listening. I should really just create a website with my vital statistics on it. It could be live. There has to be a way I can hook up a heart monitor to my computer just to let people know I'm alive." To this day, Steve's Instagram handle is Steve Burns Alive, with a bio that reads, "I've seen the meme."
Jesus
Unfortunately
Christ,
for Steve, he didn't exactly become the rock star he dreamed of being. Most of his buzz from his first project was earned due to the juxtaposition of his Blues Clues
Daryl
career.
Hammond.
After that, he started another band, Steve Burns and the Struggle, alongside the Flaming Lips Steven Drozd and A Million Billion frontman Ryan Smith. The collective released an album, Deep Sea Recovery Efforts, in 2009, but it failed to do anything substantial. For many years, Steve disappeared from the spotlight. Slowly but surely, rumors of his death, addiction, and God knows what else made their way back onto the internet. But in 2017, Steve got a call that he never thought he would get. Nickelodeon gave the original creators of Blues Clues permission to develop a reboot of the series after multiple failed attempts. Nickelodeon posted a video announcing that they were looking for a new host of the show. Steve helped the creators during the casting process, and after 1,000 auditions, they eventually selected Josh De La Cruz, who was an understudy for Disney's Aladdin on Broadway for 5 years.
Oh,
De La
cool.
Cruz would play Steve and Joe's cousin, Josh. Steve was initially reluctant to continue his association with the show, but was persuaded by its fans on social media to write, direct, and appear on the show. The reboot, Blues Clues and
That's
You,
cool.
has been a huge success following its premiere, producing
yeah.
4 seasons before being renewed for a 5th early last year. Keep in mind, most people had no idea this even happened. Unless you have kids or very young siblings, you probably never knew that Steve returned to the show. But in 2021, Nick Jr.'s Twitter account posted a video for the 25th anniversary of Blues Clues featuring Steve, and we all thought he had returned from the dead.
Hi. You got a second? Okay. You remember how when we were younger we used to run around and hang out with Blue and find clues and talk to Mr. Salt and freak out about the mail and do all the fun stuff, and then one day I was like, oh hey, guess what? Big news. I'm leaving. This is my brother Joe. He's your new best friend. And then I got on a bus and I left. And we didn't see each other for like a really long time. Can we just talk about that? Great. Because I realized that was kind of abrupt.
Steve went on to explain what happened to his character, continuing the fake story of him going to college, because having a really unsuccessful rock band was not the narrative Nickelodeon wanted to continue. But his ability to speak through the camera and develop a one-on-one connection with the viewer resonated deeply with Blues Clues fans. It's like we were all 5 years old again.
I watched
The post
this,
was
dude.
retweeted 700,000 times and liked by 1.9
This is like one of the
million people.
dopest
I think the overwhelming engagement is a huge
caps.
testament to how powerful these rumors were over the years. Literally millions of people around the world thought he was a criminal, a drug addict, or dead. It's almost as if people wanted to believe them, because the rumors were debunked numerous times over the years. So for him to essentially return from the shadows after 2 decades was shocking for so many people. This return finally put the rumors to rest. Steve Burns is not a child predator, he is not a drug addict, he is not a criminal, and most certainly not dead. Although he didn't want to be in kids' TV originally, he doesn't regret it at all. I hope I'll be remembered for that show for the rest of my life. That will always be a part of my identity, and I'm totally cool with that.
Yep.
Today, Burns travels to colleges around the country to speak to students about mental health because those rumors destroyed his, and now he's using that to help you improve yours.
All right, drink water. What's next?
Just after midnight on Saturday, June 17th,
All right. So that was Patrick CC. Don't forget to subscribe to him. Go watch and like that video. You can turn on the background, turn off the sound. Just give him a like and watch. This is Leah Miller. How Watergate ruined everything. And I don't know if I am subscribed. Nope. Now we are. Sorry, Leah. Let's watch.
1972, at the Watergate complex in Washington, D.C., security guard Frank Wills was conducting his usual nightly rounds. Being the thorough security guard that he was, he noticed
gonna
something
play
was
guitar.
strange. Tape was stuck to the latches on the doors leading from the underground car park up to the offices of the Democratic National Committee. The tape allowed the doors to shut but remain unlatched and unlocked. Frank removed the tape, assuming it was placed there inadvertently. A short time later, Frank returned to the area and discovered that someone was in the building and had retaped the the latches on the doors. Suspecting a break-in, Frank called the police. Across the street, inside a hotel room with a clear view of the Watergate complex and DNC headquarters offices, Alfred Baldwin had set down his binoculars, distracted by the film Attack of the Puppet People playing on his hotel TV.
No.
If he had been observing the building like he was supposed to be, he would have seen 3 plainclothes police officers pull up and head straight for the DNC 6th floor office suite. By the time he realized what was happening inside the building, it was too late. The police apprehended 5 men inside the DNC headquarters. They were later charged with attempted burglary and attempted interception of telephone and other communications. Within hours of the burglars' arrests, the FBI discovered that 2 of the men had connections to E. Howard Hunt, a CIA operative who himself had connections to Nixon's secret group known as the White House Plumbers, established to help stop security leaks and covertly investigate other sensitive security matters. What followed was a cover-up, and then a cover-up of the cover-up that would unravel the United States presidency and put the country's system of checks and balances to the test in a way that was unprecedented in the history of the country. Nixon's playbook of denial, deception, and disinformation was later put on steroids and applied throughout the Trump presidency in ways we're just now uncovering. Nixon walked so that Trump could run, and we're still dealing with the fallout from Watergate to this day. This is how the Watergate scandal changed American politics forever. Roll the intro.
Damn. I don't know if I've ever watched your channel, Leah Miller. I like this.
Thank you to Factor for partnering with me on today's video. Y'all, it is summertime, and I am trying to have the fullest, bestest,
sponsors. We are
hot
not
girl
sponsored.
summer.
No
What's the
sponsors,
girl
no, sorry. Factor, fuck Factor. We don't give a fuck about your sponsor.
The committee 75.com or click the link below and use
fuck
code
this sponsor. Don't listen to her.
get 50% off your first
Fuck
Factor
your sponsor.
box.
Your sponsor
Thanks, Factor.
sucks.
After Nixon was elected president in 1968, the Committee to Re-elect the President, or CRP for short, was founded as a fundraising committee to help secure Nixon's 1972 re-election campaign. But that committee, well, they were willing to do a lot more than silly little fundraising events and voter registration drives to try to get their man re-elected. No, they wanted to commit crimes. B&Es, wiretapping, espionage, covert surveillance. They wanted to be secret spy agents. And so they made a plan. They would break into the Democratic National Committee headquarters, take pictures of important documents, and plant wiretaps so that they could gather information that would help them win the 1972 election for their Republican, Richard Nixon. In January 1972, Gordon Liddy, the finance counsel for the CRP, presented a campaign intelligence plan to CRP leadership, including former Attorney General John Mitchell, and the plan included illegal activities against the Democratic Party. After Mitchell and other CRP leaders approved the plan. By May 1972, the CRP started executing their plan. They paid burglars who broke into DNC headquarters and wiretapped 2 phones, including DNC chairman Larry O'Brien. Not long after, however, the committee discovered that the listening devices that they had planted in the DNC needed repairs. So the group again planned to break into DNC headquarters to do those repairs and take some more pictures. This time, however, they got caught. The immediate fallout from the attempted burglary and subsequent arrest was subdued. Nixon played dumb. His press secretary called it nothing more than a third-rate burglary attempt. At an August 29th press conference, Nixon stated, "I can say categorically that no one in the White House staff, no one in this administration presently employed was involved in this very bizarre incident." Behind the scenes, however, the cover-up had already begun. Martha Mitchell, the wife of former Attorney General John Mitchell, who was, you'll recall, the head of the CRP, she made the connection that the CRP and her husband knew the men who had been arrested for the burglary and were likely behind the whole incident. She tried to speak to the press. 5 days after the break-in, Martha was on the phone with a reporter saying that she would leave her husband if he didn't quit the dirty business of politics when the conversation ended abruptly, and Martha could be heard in the background telling someone to get away from her. Then, the line went dead. A former FBI agent had ripped the cord out of the wall and forcibly restrained her. She would be held captive for 5 days and forcibly sedated to keep her from sharing what she knew with the media. During this time, the FBI was investigating the Watergate incident, and a mysterious FBI source, nicknamed Deep Throat, was feeding Washington Post reporters information about what the FBI was finding. On August 1st, the FBI found that a $25,000 cashier's check worth $175,000 in today's money was deposited into the bank accounts of one of the men arrested at Watergate that night. The kicker? The check was from a private individual and made out to the committee to re-elect the president. How did a check, meant for Nixon's re-election campaign, end up in the bank account of the unknown burglar who had then used that money to buy the hardware to use to break into the DNC? The plot thickens. On October 10th, less than 1 month before the 1972 election, Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein of the Washington Post reported that the FBI had determined that the Watergate break-in was part of a massive campaign of political spying and sabotage on behalf of the Nixon re-election committee. The Nixon campaign was immediately on the defensive, endlessly attacking the Washington Post for its disinformation and campaign of fake news against the president. The Washington Post reporters, Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein, were relentlessly dedicated to uncovering the scandal, and they had a hunch that something big was brewing. The rest of the media, however, either downplayed it or failed entirely to cover the story at all. In the meantime, Nixon had a huge re-election budget, solid approval ratings, and recent successes, opening China to the world with a visit that year, as well as achieving détente with the Soviet Union, and these successes were used to drown out the calls by the Washington Post that something was amiss. Less than a month after the Washington Post revealed that Watergate was connected to Nixon's re-election campaign, Nixon won the 1972 presidential election in one of the biggest landslides in American political history. In January 1973, right before Nixon's inauguration for his second term, the trial began against the 7 men accused of participating in and orchestrating the Watergate break-in. 5 of the men, including CIA operative E. Howard Hunt, pled guilty. Gordon Liddy and James McCord refused to cooperate, and they were convicted. Old James McCord, though, he had a change of heart, so before sentencing, he wrote the judge a letter saying officials high up in the White House had orchestrated the plot and had pressured the defendants to plead guilty and take the fall. When McCord's letter to the judge was released, it sent ripples through the country. What the Washington Post reporters had been screaming for months became incredibly apparent. The Watergate break-in was just the tip of the iceberg. This wasn't a simple criminal case. This was a political scandal that quickly captured national attention. In May of 1973, the Senate officially created the Watergate Committee to investigate the CRP, the president, and the lead-up and subsequent cover-up of the Watergate break-in. You know the January 6th committee and all those televised hearings that they held? Yeah, the Watergate Committee was like that. The DOJ launched its own independent investigation led by special counsel Archibald Cox. Consider him the Bob Mueller or John Smith of the Watergate scandal. Ah, how history loves to repeat itself. And if you remember the January 6th committee hearings, well, the Watergate hearings were like that, but on steroids. They were broadcast on every major news network throughout the summer of 1973, and over 70% of American households with TVs tuned in to watch as the hearings unfolded. The bombshell came on Monday, July 16th, when White House Assistant Alexander Butterfield appeared to testify.
Correct. Mr. Butterfield, are you aware of the installation of any listening devices in the Oval Office of the President? I was aware of listening devices. Yes, sir.
With the revelation that Nixon had been recording everything said inside the Oval Office since 1970, the nature of the investigation changed. It became focused intensely on gaining access to those tapes to determine definitively whether Nixon was involved in the Watergate plot and what he did to cover it up. Cox immediately subpoenaed the tapes as part of the DOJ investigation, as did the Senate Watergate Committee. But Nixon refused to comply. It doesn't look good, Richie. His reason for why he didn't believe he had to comply with the subpoena? Executive privilege. Sound familiar? 2 weeks later, the judge involved with the Watergate investigation ordered Nixon to hand over 9 tapes for private review. And 2 months later, in October 1973, Nixon's vice president, Spiro Agnew, resigned amid charges of receiving thousands of dollars in kickbacks and other improper payments throughout his political career and into his vice presidency. Nixon named then House Minority Leader Gerald Ford as his new vice president 2 days later. Meanwhile, Nixon continued fighting the subpoena for his tapes in court. After the appeals court ruled that no, executive privilege didn't apply and yes, he would have to hand over those tapes, Nixon began feeling the walls closing in on him. In a panic, on October 20th, 1973, Nixon asked Cox, the special investigator trying to get his hands on those tapes, he asked him to resign, and Cox refused. Nixon then asked Attorney General Elliot Richardson to fire Cox. Richardson refused, and in protest, he resigned his post as Attorney General. So then Nixon ordered Richardson's assistant, William Ruckelshaus, to fire Cox, and he also refused, and then resigned. Next in line was Solicitor General Robert Bork, and he finally was like, fine, I'll do it. and Bork finally fired Cox, putting an end to the night history would call the Saturday Night Massacre. Less than a month later, in November 1973, Nixon urged the nation to just get over Watergate already, uttering what would become his most infamous line, "I'm not a crook."
Because people have got to know whether or not their president's a crook. Well, I'm not a crook.
That same week, the White House told the Senate and the DOJ Special Watergate investigation that, oops, we can't find 2 of those tapes you asked for. And also, oops, one of the tapes just has 18.5 minutes of silence right in the middle, and we don't know how that happened. Despite this, and after a year of investigations, in March of 1974, a grand jury in Washington, D.C. voted to indict 7 former aides of President Nixon for conspiring to hinder the Watergate investigation, including former Attorney General John Mitchell. You know, the one who had his own wife held hostage so she wouldn't tell the media. John Mitchell, as Attorney General, was known for his gruffness and strong, tough-on-crime, law and order stance. So it was incredibly ironic that he was indicted and later sent to prison for obstruction of justice, conspiracy, and perjury in relation to his planning and cover-up of the Watergate
fitting,
scandal.
not just ironic,
in that same
but
indictment,
fitting.
Nixon was secretly named as an unindicted co-conspirator under the belief that he couldn't be formally indicted while he was a sitting president, even though they had lots and lots of evidence to believe he was definitely guilty of some crimes. After this, things quickly began unraveling for Nixon. In April 1974, the DOJ subpoenaed 64 more Nixon tapes. In May, the House Judiciary Committee began hearings on whether to write up articles of impeachment. In July, the Supreme Court definitively ruled that Nixon's tapes were not protected by executive privilege. And by the end of July, the House Judiciary Committee adopted 3 articles of impeachment against the president for obstructing the Watergate investigation, misuse of power and violating his oath of office, and failure to comply with White House subpoenas. Then, on August 5th, 1974, having lost his executive privilege argument at the Supreme Court, Nixon released transcripts of 3 conversations he had 6 days after the Watergate break-in. These transcripts would become known as the smoking gun of the Watergate investigation. They showed Nixon ordering the FBI to stop its investigation into the break-in and directing a cover-up of the entire scandal. 3 days later, before formal impeachment proceedings could begin, Nixon stunned the nation in a televised address by announcing that he would be resigning the presidency effective at noon the next day. The next day, on August 9th, 1974, Vice President Gerald Ford, who 10 months earlier had just been the minority leader in the House of Representatives, became the 38th President of the United States. A month later, President Gerald Ford granted Nixon a full, free, and absolute pardon for all offenses against the United States. Nixon maintained his innocence until his death in 1994. Overall, 69 people were indicted and 48 people were convicted for participating in or covering up the Watergate break-in. Republicans lost tons of seats in the next 1974 midterm elections as cynicism and distrust of government increased from the Watergate incident, combined with fallout from the failures of the Vietnam War. Congress made moves to significantly limit the power of the executive branch, including passage of the Privacy Act of 1974, which established fair information practices related to the collection and use of information about individuals maintained by federal agencies like the FBI. The Church Committee in the Senate held hearings to unearth other covert government activities and domestic spying, uncovering evidence that the CIA had spied on domestic political opponents, carried out assassinations overseas, and experimented with LSD on unwitting Americans. These revelations further eroded the nation's trust in government. The Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act in 1978 created tight controls for CIA wiretaps and other investigation methods, and created a stronger system of checks and balances to mitigate against future amassing of power by the CIA director. Most law schools
Sounds
around
like
the
these
country
would've been
instituted a
repealed.
policy requiring ethics courses, and the American Bar Association created a stronger professional responsibility code in response to Watergate, because nearly half of the people indicted during the scandal were lawyers. In other reforms, caps were placed on campaign contributions, transparency laws were strengthened, and new laws codified how an independent counsel would investigate future presidents. This string of reforms gave more power to Congress and took it away from the president in order to try to curb any future executive misbehavior and avoid a similar constitutional crisis. Despite these reforms, Watergate did irreparable damage to America's collective faith in government, how we think about the presidency, and how we view politicians. Nixon's successors, Ford and Carter, were unable to secure second terms. Then came Reagan. in the 1980s, and he brought back some of that shiny veneer to the presidency, despite the fact that he did ruin everything. And in the decades since Watergate, many of those reforms have been rolled back. Court rulings set campaign financing restrictions back. Surveillance increased dramatically after the 9/11 attacks. Trump was able to fire inspectors general with no legal consequences, and the independent counsel statute expired in 1999, meaning that Trump's own attorney generals were able to appoint special counsels, which is exactly what post-Watergate reforms were meant to avoid.
Damn.
Trump, for his
How
part,
did that
seems to be
happen?
well aware of the Watergate scandal, despite the fact that I'm not certain that Trump is literate. But because 50 years have passed since the
can't be
scandal
sure.
erupted, and today we generally have a pretty tenuous collective grasp on the details and what the fallout of Watergate was, Trump has been able to rewrite the history of Watergate in a way that speaks volumes about his opinion on how much impunity with which a president should be able to act. In the early days of his candidacy for president, Trump pointed to Hillary's private email server as magnitudes worse than Watergate.
This magnitude's worse, in my opinion, and in the opinion of many people in law enforcement. This is worse than Watergate, what's going on with this.
This despite the fact that Trump openly embraced many Nixonisms, including his Law and Order campaign rhetoric from
The
1968.
pictures,
Trump's
bro.
campaign chairman,
No.
Paul Manafort, confirmed that Trump would
Too
base his
good.
nomination acceptance speech on the one that Nixon used in
Paul
1968. And in tweets and speeches throughout his campaign and
Seriously? That's
presidency,
so
Trump
gross.
repurposed Nixon quotes and phrases, including using terms like lawlessness and echoing Nixon's fears about a
Ugh.
frightening trend of crime and anarchy, especially during the protests that erupted after the murder of George Floyd here in Minneapolis. Not to mention that his obsession with discrediting the mainstream news media closely mirrors the ways in which Nixon attempted to discredit the media, especially during the Watergate investigations.
What is it about the television coverage of you in these past weeks and months that has so aroused your anger?
Don't get the impression that you arouse my anger. One can only be angry with those he respects.
They will say,
Oh, fucker.
Donald Trump rants and raves at the press. I'm not ranting and raving. I'm just telling you, you're dishonest people. But, I'm not ranting and raving.
And this isn't hypothetical. Trump literally knew Nixon. He was close with Nixon advisor Roy Cohn and friends with Nixon's Treasury Secretary John B. Connally. Trump and Nixon spent a weekend together in 1989, celebrating Connally's birthday, sharing dinner together, and riding back to New York on Trump's private jet together. Nixon wrote Trump a letter saying Nixon's wife had predicted that whenever you decide to run for office, you will be a winner. All of this makes Trump's cognitive dissonance around the Watergate scandal all the more puzzling. Hillary's emails are worse than Watergate. Nixon is someone to be venerated and whose political style Trump is mimicking in many ways. But also, according to Trump, Nixon may not have been guilty and was a coward for quitting. He left. I didn't leave, Trump said in 2019. Big difference. I don't leave. Basically, Nixon screwed up. He got caught. Meanwhile, people on the left hurl accusations that Trump's actions are worse than or akin to Watergate. Like, for instance, when he fired FBI Director James Comey, or asked the FBI to stop investigating his national security advisor Michael Flynn, or tried to interfere with Robert Mueller's investigation, or withheld troops while urging Ukraine to investigate his political opponent Joe Biden. But Trump's retelling of Watergate has sown enough seeds of doubt that he's able to manipulate history for his supporters, spinning it into another example of how there are conspiracies at every turn meant to take powerful people like Trump down, which is the same rhetoric Trump turns to when any accusation of wrongdoing is thrown his way, from sexual misconduct to high crimes and misdemeanors. According to historian Michael Gerhardt, truth doesn't matter. What matters is the narrative. It's much more important what people believe than what they know. By changing the Watergate narrative, Trump has opportunities to manipulate history, and his lawyers have opportunities to go to court and relitigate the same questions that Nixon faced and lost. The Supreme Court found against Nixon then, but maybe they got it wrong. Or that's what Trump and his lawyers want to argue. Trump doesn't have to respond to subpoenas or submit to investigations. The president can bypass Congress, open DOJ cases and investigations against his enemies, and authorize the assassination of an Iranian commander without telling Congress.
That's it. That's a wrap, folks. Thanks for hanging out with us. You can finish this video. Check it out in the description. We will see you next time. Bye-bye.